In the silence of Dallas nights, the city lay wrapped in darkness. And in that silence, a predator moved. Not for money, not for lust, not even for rage. He hunted for something colder, something symbolic, something that cut to the very essence of human identity. He hunted for eyes. Charles Albright, the man who would later be branded the eyeball killer, seemed like anything but a murderer. To neighbors, he was polite and helpful. To his wife, he was gentle. To friends, he was intelligent, refined, even charming. But behind the quiet smile lived an obsession that would etch his name into the darkest pages of American crime history. Born in 1933 in Amarillo, Texas, Albright was adopted at a young age. His adoptive mother was strict, controlling, and unyielding. From childhood, Charles displayed unusual intelligence. He skipped grades, mastered subjects faster than his peers, and excelled in both science and art. But intelligence without balance can become dangerous. At just 11 years old, his mother enrolled him in taxidermy lessons. It was meant to encourage discipline and skill, but instead it planted the seed of a disturbing obsession. There, Charles learned to skin animals, preserve their bodies, and most importantly, to replace their eyes with glass replicas. For most children, lifeless bodies would inspire fear or disgust. Charles found fascination. He became obsessed with detail, with precision, with eyes as objects rather than symbols of life. That fascination never faded. As he grew older, Albright wore intelligence like a mask. He studied pre-med, then shifted to art, then to teaching. But he never finished anything honestly. He forged documents, lied about his achievements, and manipulated others to believe he was more than he was. Outwardly, he seemed respectable. Inwardly, he was empty. His life was scattered with petty crimes, fraud, theft, forgery, but no one imagined where his path would lead. By the end of 1990, his fixation turned deadly. On December 13th, Mary Lou Pratt, a sex worker, was found murdered in Dallas. She had been shot in the head. But when the medical examiner examined her body, they froze in horror. Her eyes had been removed with surgical precision. The cuts were clean, almost clinical. There was little blood. The eyes had been taken after death. Weeks later, another victim surfaced. Susan Peterson, shot and discarded. Her eyes gone. In March 1991, the nightmare escalated. Shirley Williams was found. Again murdered. Again her eyes missing. The pattern was undeniable. Dallas was in fear. Among sex workers, whispers spread of a man with glasses. Calm, polite, yet unsettling. A man whose presence carried something that did not feel right. For investigators, it was clear this was not impulsive violence. This was ritualistic, obsessive, cold. Suspicions soon turned toward Charles Albright. He lived nearby. He had a history with weapons. And most of all, he had a lifelong obsession with eyes. A surviving sex worker described how terrifying his presence was. Evidence mounted. Fibers from the victim's clothing linked back to his home. Ballistics tied him to the crimes. The mask began to slip. When Albright was arrested, there was no fight. No panic. He went quietly. Calm, even smiling. He denied everything but never once lost his composure. At trial, prosecutors presented the chilling picture. His taxidermy lessons, his fascination with eyes, his manipulative charm. The evidence that tied him to murder. In 1991, he was convicted of the murder of Shirley Williams and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The other cases remained legally unproven, but forever connected to his name. He never confessed. Until his death in 2020 at the age of 86, he maintained his innocence. The true number of his victims remains uncertain. Some say 3, others believe there were more. Because when obsession becomes compulsion, it rarely stops. The horror of the eyeball killer lies not only in the murders, but in the symbolism. To remove eyes is not just mutilation. It is erasure. Eyes are the witnesses of life, the mirrors of the soul, the windows of identity. To take them is to strip away what makes a human being whole. Charles Albright remains a chilling reminder that the darkest monsters often wear the most ordinary faces. The polite smile of a neighbor, the quiet presence of a friend, a mask hiding a darkness colder than death. So when you next meet someone's gaze, when you feel the weight of their eyes on you, remember the man who could not look without wanting to take. Remember that behind every smile there may be secrets. And remember that darkness often hides in plain sight.